All right, the recording is in progress. Here we go. Another night with Brother Lawrence. We're going to be on the 13th letter. We're going to start on page 75. The 13th letter. All right. Before we dive in, is there anything, any old business, anything you all want to talk about? Anything left over from last week that we need to get up on before we dive into something new? I am honoring the silence. 1, 2, 2.5.
Nothing from me. I beat my drum too much. Enough last week. Not too much. Enough last week.
Oh, no, that's okay, man. Beat the drum. This is what we need. Did you have something else?
No, I didn't. No, I got it out of my system. It took me 3 days to get it over it.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's see if we can give you some more fodder. Something else that will come up the works, and we can talk about that. Okay, here we go with the
T-shirt on, Dave.
Oh, I like it. I like it.
Enjoy the journey.
What's underneath? Enjoy the journey.
Enjoy the journey.
And what's under your hand?
Hughes Marino. Wow. They're a real estate company. I just didn't want to give them free advertising.
There you go. Okay. Enjoy the journey. Very cool. Enjoy the ride. Enjoy the journey. Okay, so we got a 13th letter now. I think there's only 16 letters, right? So we are getting close to being done with the letters. Yes. And then we'll hit the spiritual maxims, and then we'll jump into just this. How many of you have ordered just this yet? Oh, look at you. What's up with the rest of you? William's already got his copy. William, how long did it take you to get that copy?
Next day.
Are you serious? Through Amazon?
Yeah, I'm a special Amazon Prime member, so I don't know if you have the same privileges that I.
Well, we've got Amazon Prime, and it took me 3 weeks to get my copy.
Yeah,
it took me 2 weeks.
2 weeks to get
Amazon Prime.
Yeah, but William's at the center of the universe.
Yeah. That is amazing. 1 day, because that's usually what they do, but I didn't know why it was taking so long. If you go on the Amazon site, it says it's going to be 2 to 3 weeks. So, order as soon as you can, because it might take you some time. If you don't mind the brown bag version, you can order from Richard Rohr's bookstore at CAC directly. That came in about 6 days, 5 or 6 days.
They're exactly the same.
They're exactly the same on the inside. The one is smaller, and it's not bound as nicely. That comes from Richard Rohr. Doesn't have the cover art or anything like that. It's really a brown bag version, but it is exactly the same layout. It's just shrunk down to fit the smaller book size. So the pages will line up if you want to go that route. But yeah, I'd say we've got another 3 or 4 weeks here. So if you order now, you'll be just in time. All right, 13th letter to the Reverend Mother N. We're still talking to the same woman. She is still sick. All right. And she's going to be sick in the next letter too. So one thing I was thinking about, obviously many of the letters are to the same woman, but have you noticed that most of the letters that Brother Lawrence writes are to women? I think there's only been one that was written to a man, 1 or 2. I'd have to go back and actually, but most of them are to women. And that's in, do you think there's any reason for that?
Maybe they're the ones asking for help.
See, I think Ellen's onto something. I think maybe the women are more open, especially to learning from someone like Brother Lawrence, who doesn't have a lot of standing ecclesiastically. They're the ones that are actually asking him and seeking him out. Although Beaufort, his friend, was very taken with Brother Lawrence. He's the one who's responsible, really, for bringing Brother Lawrence's conversations and letters forth. But I just thought it was interesting that it's really women that he's talking to.
Only one man.
Well, that's what I thought. There was only one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he alludes to a letter that he wrote to another man and then sent to the woman to give to him. But we don't have that. But it's all women. So I thought that was really interesting, and it probably makes perfect sense. Women, as Ellen said, are the ones who tend to ask for help. In my counseling, I'd say I'm counseling probably at least 80% women. But I think probably for the same reason. It's women who are willing to ask for help. It's women who are willing to ask for directions when they're driving, right? Same sort of thing. All right. And she's still sick. I think it'd be interesting just to understand that not only is she sick, but Brother Lawrence, as he is tending to her, is also sick at the same time. He is only at the time that, if you take a look at the next page, this letter is dated November 28, 1590. Brother Lawrence died on February 12, 1691. He's only 2.5 months from his own death as he writes this letter. And in his last year of life, he was very, very ill. He had 3 major illnesses, kind of one on top of the other. And the last one, or maybe one that was kind of concurrent with the other ones, is called pleurisy. I don't know if you're familiar with pleurisy, but it is an inflammation of the pleura, which is a sheath that covers the lungs. And it gets inflamed and it swells, and it's really, really painful. So he was in a great deal of pain, and it was a pleurisy attack that actually killed him the following February. So he's in a lot of pain himself. He's been sick for a year. He doesn't know it, but he's 2 months from his own death, and he's tending to her. And I think it can give you maybe a little more insight into some of the advice that he's giving her, and certainly gives him a lot more credibility for some of the advice that he's giving her, especially when it sounds like he's trivializing her illness or trivializing her pain, or at least, talking about it as something from God, or, in some way minimizing the pain, or trying to get her to look in another direction from it, to realize the pain that he was in at the same time and what he was going through at the same time. I think gives it a little bit more gravitas. So, not only that, since I told you he had those 3 illnesses in that final year of his life, the first illness, the doctor was able to heal him, to cure him from it. You know what he said to the doctor? He said, "Doc, your remedies have worked too well. You have delayed my happiness." It's so Brother Lawrence, isn't it? But what an attitude, and even a humorous attitude toward his own mortality and vulnerability and eventual death and the pain that he was in. I just thought that was a great little insight into his character and into where he was, just a few months before, a year before he died. Some little insights as we're going to start reading through this letter. Okay, he says, "My good mother, if we were accustomed to the regular exercise of the presence of God, all the ills of the body would be lessened. God often permits us to suffer a little, purify our souls, and to bring us to him. I cannot understand how a soul that is with God and desires only him can be capable of suffering. I have enough experience to believe this cannot be so." All right. So just keeping in mind everything that we just talked about in terms of where he was personally, there's a lot here that you can understand that he is going through at the same time. He's probably talking to himself at the same time that he's talking to her. So if we're accustomed to the regular exercise of the presence of God, all the ills of the body would be lessened. So he believes that this practice of presence relieves the experience of suffering that is going on at the same time. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced that. That presence, that mindfulness can relieve some of the pain that you might be feeling. And then he gets a little controversial here. God often permits us to suffer a little to purify our souls and to bring us to him. And this is something that, is a repeating theme with him that we've gone over many times. Does God really permit the suffering? Does he cause the suffering, in order to bring us to him, in order to teach us something, in order to grow us out? Is that really the way God works? And We've talked about that quite a bit. I cannot understand how a soul that is with God and desires only Him can be capable of suffering. So he's talking about in this state of presence. He doesn't even believe that someone can be capable of suffering. That once you're in this presence, everything else just is displaced, is leaves. How's that setting with anybody with that up there?
But how does he explain that if he himself was suffering from his illness?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then he says, I have enough experience to believe this cannot be so. And so I guess, how was he experiencing his suffering? Was he coming in and out of it to the extent, because he talks about that he does, it's not that he is 100% in God's presence all the time. He talks about his own kind of oscillation back and forth. His mind will wander off and then he just keeps bringing it back, bringing it back. Oh. So does he experience his suffering that way? When his mind is wandering, he's present to the suffering again. When he's present to God, he feels relief. It's hard to say. Saying something, William? Okay.
I think I understand what he's talking about, at least the way I want to apply it in my life. I've thought of what would be the most suffering situation that I found myself in, and that's when the day my son died. And the way the events unfolded, I very quickly locked into the things that I've read in the Bible and the things that I've memorized and studied over the years and the promises that God makes. And by locking in on those things, it saved me some level of suffering. Don't get me wrong, it's still a horrible thing to have happen, and I wish I didn't have to experience it all. But I believe that I was saved from some of the suffering some people feel when they have nobody to turn to. I often say this with my friends. We believe in God, and here's what you're going through and what I'm going through, and with God's help, we get through it. What are people who don't believe in God or have any concept of a creator? Where do they turn to in their times of suffering? So that's what I think he's talking about, is when you can rein your thoughts in and wrap your mind around God's promises, that your immediate present circumstances can be lessened in intensity. I hope I'm being clear. I think I'm being clear.
Oh, you are. Yeah. Okay. Has anyone else experienced what Scott is talking about? That you were able to kind of move away or through the suffering as you connected more with God's presence?
Well, I hope so. Otherwise, what are we doing here, guys? God wants to save us a lot of pain if we can avoid it. Otherwise, why do we pray when we're suffering? What is it we're hoping to gain? Doesn't have to be a big, huge gain like my immediate emotions over my son's death. It can be just a little disappointment around the house or something like that, but we turn it over to God and say, okay, God, help me not get upset about this, not get frustrated about this. Help me to deal with this. And then you pray, and hopefully if you listen and he talks in whatever ways you perceive you hear from God, kind of find a little bit calmer way to navigate through the pain and the suffering or whatever is irritating you at the moment. What do you think? Any thoughts on that, guys?
I have a thought.
Go ahead.
Go ahead,
Well,
Sharon.
I've had pleurisy, and I'm thinking if he had pleurisy, I'm surprised he was even able to talk at all, because you can't move. It hurts so bad to breathe, to do anything. I mean, it's just, so if he was helping somebody else, he had some kind of stamina or something, because I don't know how he did it. It's one painful thing. I mean, one really painful disease. I had a punctured lung. That's what caused it.
Were you going to say something, William?
Just speaking for myself, I don't suffer a lot. Certainly not to, I can't remember the last time my suffering or my pain or struggles brought me to a place where I was calling on God for help. Like like whatever I'm going through, I just kind of deal with it. and I recognize I probably should incorporate God more in my struggles, but I kind of doesn't occur to me in those moments for some reason.
Hey, William, are you knocking on wood right now?
Yep. But yeah, I mean, maybe I haven't, and I talked about some of my stumbling blocks in here before, like this restriction of God for me as like a good idea. Like it makes sense, but I don't know if it's this fully felt surrendering to kind of experience. And I think it's because I haven't really been through enough to, bring me to the end of my rope kind of deal. So, I like what he's saying here and I don't disagree at all with it. It's not a lived experience for me.
Mhm. Well, I think I can speak for Kathy and myself, is that when I had that kidney stone, there wasn't anything taking that pain away. I'll tell you that. Yeah, it would come in waves, and it's just like when I felt the next one coming, it's just like, oh no. And there really wasn't too much I could do to stave that off. But I will say, like Scott is talking about, emotional pain or frustration and the kind of psychological craziness that can befall all of us. I can move into and through that often by moving into presence, and especially presence with another person. That's what really helps me to really lock onto a conversation, lock onto the eyes and just be present again. And I can displace that other stuff. Physical pain, depends. I guess for me, it has depended on the severity. There are some pains, headaches, and this and that. I can blow past those with presence and connection.
Your lips moving, but no sound's coming out, Dave.
Say again, now what?
Your lips were moving, but no sound was coming out.
Okay, so what did you not hear? Did you hear anything I was saying?
About 15 seconds worth we missed. The last 15 seconds.
I don't know what is going on with my audio lately. That's really annoying. Yeah, I was saying that I can. I'm sorry.
I think we got most of it though.
Okay. I can move through lesser pains and things that are more garden variety and just kind of blow past those. Something like the kidney stone, I was not able to. And it's something now we've had a little bit of insight into pleurisy with Sherry. I don't know when an actual attack would come on, because it was that attack in February that killed him. Maybe he couldn't move past it either. But he was able to then get to the other side and then come back into presence. It's hard to know, what his experience really was. And so, we don't want to try to hold ourselves to a standard that we're imagining Brother Lawrence being here, because we really don't know. But I think we can say that the more that we're connected with God, the less of the things that are painful around us are going to matter. I
Right.
think that we can say is absolutely.
I agree with you, Dave, about the emotional. I was having a bad day today and did some meditation and did some practicing of presence and turned my day around. But when it comes to pain, I'll never forget, I had double pneumonia and I kept screaming at my son, "Bring me drugs. You're a druggie, go get me drugs." So I didn't do very good with the pain. I wanted drugs. I'm not kidding. I was screaming at him, "Find me drugs." So I don't do good with the pain, but the emotional and the spiritual, yes, I can relate to that, but not pleurisy like Sherry's talking about, a punctured lung or kidney stone. No, no, I don't do well with pain. I might fuss at God a little bit, in fact.
Yeah, I've actually had these moments where I'm frustrated and I'm like, Jehovah, like, show me the way, but it's more like, show me the effing way, and it's not, it's not a prayer by any means. It's more of, kind of like a Jesus Christ in frustration, more of that energy. And usually it doesn't help when I go there in that mindset.
I think it's interesting because sometimes a prayer, maybe a prayer like William is describing, is still focusing us on the problem. It's keeping our mind on the problem. It's keeping our mind on the pain, rather than us losing ourselves and our sense of problem and pain in the presence. And there's a big difference between the two. And this is part of the problem that I have with the fixation on spiritual warfare. Because if we keep focusing on the negative, that's what we're going to get. That's what is strengthened. That's what's reinforced. And that's what we experience. And so to focus on the connection, to focus on God's presence, to focus on each other's presence, it's whatever we focus on is going to be strengthened in us. And what we're really trying to do is to lose ourselves, not to focus on ourselves more and the problem, even under the guise of wanting to surmount it or relieve it. And so I think it's where we're going with our presence that's going to make the difference, and not so much the words. Show me the effing way, Jehovah, is a perfectly good prayer if it's directing you towards Jehovah.
And I just want to say something too, back to what you were saying, Scott, about loss, the loss of your son and such. And I think about a loss that I went through as well. And I think from the emotional side, when I was reaching, I think, and now looking back, if I'm reaching for God, I'm doing it through other people, kind of. I'm sort of seeking it through other people. I'm not commiserating, but it was more of I had some friends that had been through the exact same thing that I had gone through, and they reached out to me immediately, and I practically grasped onto them, and we just all cried together and just walked through it. And so it's kind of like that. If that's a way of getting some sort of peace and healing from God through other people, I would say that kind of works too. I didn't do it really internally, not right away, because I sort of was in a craze of I didn't really know what I was thinking, but I certainly got it from other people. That helped.
Thanks for sharing,
Yep.
Kathy.
Right with you, Kathy. Right with you. I can't remember who said it. Maybe it was Mother Teresa who said that God comes to us disguised as light. He talked about seeing Christ disguised in each face that she was with at the houses of the poor, the house of the dying in Calcutta. And so she talks about that sense of a disguise, that God is disguised as life, God is disguised as each other. And I've come to the point, I know I've told you guys this before, that I don't think that we really love God directly. We love God by loving each other. This act of thinking that we're loving God directly through our ritual and even through prayer, I don't know how much that really covers it. But when we are with each other and we are seeing God's presence in each other and in our relationships, that's everything and powerful. And so I'm right with you. That's where I get the greatest relief. It's just being here with you all right now, even though it's electronic, it's seeing your faces and connecting. Right now, all the stuff that I was worried about half an hour ago, I haven't been thinking about until now. Thanks for bringing it up. But I think that's what it's like. That's what it's like to kind of outrun your pain, outrun your worry, outrun your anxiety, is to just step into that sacred connection, whatever it happens to be and however it's presenting at the moment.
Dave, I think the scripture, because the other night I had a really bad dream that ended up being a good dream because I looked at the symbolism behind it. I really thought about it, but I woke up in the middle of the night in distress by myself. And so I was saying in a prayer, be still and know that I am God. be still and know that I am, be still and know, be still and be.
Mhm.
And I was amazed on how comforting that was on my own.
Mm.
That, you know, when in the middle of the night, when there's nobody I can connect to, but I have to go directly to God, because I'm not going to wake somebody up in the middle of the night for a bad dream.
And that's beautiful, Lori, because that almost mantra that you were saying to yourself, and reducing that statement down to the essence, is a way. It's almost like centering prayer. You know, you drop that into your consciousness, and it just places. It's so much like a ship. You know, you put a ship into water, and it displaces the water equal to its weight. And so that's how you actually weigh a ship. You see how much water it displaces, right? It's the same thing. We put our consciousness, immerse it into the moment, and it displaces everything else as we do that. And that's kind of the image that in centering prayer, putting in the sacred word, let it displace everything else. But Lori, saying, be still and know, is immersing yourself and displacing. And that to me is the best way to look at it, because if you're focused on what you don't want and you're trying to expel these thoughts or these emotions or whatever, you're just giving them more energy. You're making them stronger. It's the wolf that you feed, right? That wins. Same.
Mhm.
So to focus on what is right in front of you, or in the case of 2:30 in the morning when it's just all dark and you're alone, to go into that kind of mode where it then displaces. That so Lori brought the relief.
Mm.
So I think that's what Brother Lawrence is talking. But we can't beat ourselves up if we can't smile through our kidney stones or our pleurisy. Okay, that's not the idea here. It's not. But I think he is making a valid point that he's trying to give this poor nun something to work with, right? Okay, so next paragraph. Take courage. Offer your sufferings to him unceasingly, and ask him for the strength to endure them. Above all, make it a habit to talk with him often, and to let him slip out of your mind as little as possible. So he's still allowing for the possibility and the reality that your mind is going to wander. It's going to do that. But again, kind of like Lori was doing, be still and know that I am God, is bringing him back into focus, back into presence. Or like William, show me the way, Jehovah, bringing them back into awareness. That is the whole point. It's not so much the words that we say, it's the intention behind the words. It's the focus behind the words that give them the power, because power is in God's presence. It's not in a formula or in a prayer or in the words, it's in the presence. Whatever connects us to that presence is powerful. That's it. Are we connected to the presence of me? So make it a habit to talk with him often, because it's going to connect you to his presence, right? And to let him slip out of your mind as little as possible. Adore him in your sufferings. Offer yourself to him from time to time. And during your worst sufferings, ask him humbly and lovingly, as a child would of his good father, for acquiescence to his will and for the help of his grace. I will aid you in this with my poor and worthless praise. Okay, going back a page to 75. Adore him in your sufferings. Riddle me that.
Mhm.
How are you going to adore God in the midst of your suffering? What does that even mean?
I'm thinking of the prayer to St. Francis. And that's what comes to mind for me.
What is that?
It's, Lord, make me a channel of thy peace. It starts.
Mhm.
Hatred, I may bring love. Where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness. Where there's discord, I may bring harmony. Where there is error, I may bring truth. And where there is doubt, I may bring faith. Where there's shadows, I bring light. And where there's sadness, I may bring joy. And then the part says, Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted. And that's where this really goes for me. To understand and to be understood, and to love rather than be loved. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds, and that is definitely giving it to him. Is by giving that one receives, and is by dying that one awakens to eternal life. That's the entire prayer. You know that one.
So-
don't you?
Prayer of Saint Anthony, you said?
No,
St. Francis.
Saint Francis, sorry.
Yeah, we used to sing that prayer in Catholic school.
I love that prayer.
Mm.
That got me.
You guys remember that one? Make me a candle of your peace. Anyway, so John, how does that prayer, that was called to mind. So what does it mean to you to adore God in the midst of your sufferings?
The key word adore. To me, to adore is to adore him is to acknowledge his ever presence, and again, like Brother Lawrence, being a humble servant, being humble in his presence, and allowing myself to be still, just like Lori said, those things all meld into the same thing for me. Does that make any sense?
That's pretty darn good.
Mhm.
Same direction I was gonna go. Yeah, I like it.
Except
know-
for the kidney stone, you have to squirm. You can't stay still.
Yeah, there's a
know
lot
that
of
works.
squirming going on with the kidney stone, you know? I've heard that the kidney stone is as close as men can come to childbirth. And I heard one woman who had both childbirth and kidney stone said that the kidney stone was actually worse. Maybe only because you don't get a baby at the end of it. You just get this little thing, if you get anything at all, that's right. But at any rate, it's pretty darn painful.
My
So
wife-
yeah, adoring God in the midst of that kind of pain, but I think John's onto something here. Go ahead, John.
Oh, well, I would just, my first interruption here, I guess, to respond to what you were saying, that there was not a baby at the end of it. But I remember distinctly my wife saying that is a greater pain than childbirth.
Oh, the kidney stones, you had both?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And what it got her was a trip to the ER in an ambulance, and 4 hours later, I'm sitting in the waiting room. She comes out. She says, "Okay, I'm ready." I went, "What?" And I learned a lot about kidney stones that day. That she didn't. You don't necessarily pass it. That evidently that when that stone is going through that canal is when the pain is the greatest. And that it lodges itself in the kidney wall itself, and is no longer painful.
No.
It gets bad. I have a friend that had to have them what do they shoot it with a laser or something like that to break it up.
Ultrasound.
And yeah, he had that procedure, and they broke it up, and so it would pass. And no thanks to that, I'm glad I haven't had that yet.
All right, so John is digressing now, but that's okay. We're gonna
Dr.
follow
Jones.
we're gonna follow him along that rabbit trail for a bit. But as far as adoration in these times is concerned, I'm with John. It's really about awareness. To bring God back into your awareness, to acknowledge his presence, to rely on God, to look to God for you know, at least in the midst of it all, and to celebrate that his presence is still with you, even though. If you have the presence of mind to be able to do that, even through a kidney stone, a pleurisy, or childbirth, or whatever, you know, really is painful. And especially if it's ongoing. I think that can bring a certain kind of it. It's not going to be like Dilaudid though, but it's going to be a certain. But at any rate, it's important for us to define these terms, because to just say to adore God, what does that really mean? Does that mean you're singing praise songs? What does that mean to adore God? And it can mean something different to every one of us, and that's okay. As long as you know what it means to you, and it's something concrete, and it's something that you can do, and you can actually do repeatedly. That's going to be the key. So define it for yourself. I'm with John. It's about awareness. It's about acknowledgement. It's about just a conscious contact with presence, or sense of presence again. That's to me adoring God. And then if we're going to take the prayer of St. Francis a little further, then of course it's emulating what we know of God's nature. Making a channel of your peace. Let me give more than I receive. Let me give the things that I want to receive, because that's the only way I'm going to experience them for myself, is when I'm giving them away. And so that is also adoration. That's adoration. That's what makes sense. So make it make sense to you. And then offer yourself to him from time to time. What does that mean to you? What does it mean to offer yourself to God? That can be another empty phrase that doesn't mean anything, or it can be really powerful.
I think it's really neat. I didn't ever think I'd try to put it into action, I guess. But I understand what you're talking about.
Okay.
Dave, I probably relate to that. What Lori was talking about in the middle of the night is the time when there's thoughts and emotions and stirrings just can, and there's nothing you can do at that time of the night. You just got to sit in it sometimes. And I think that's when I just recognize, God, here, just take all of this. I'm not going to keep wrestling with you. This sounds kind of funny, but 4 years ago, I was at the lake, and I went for a run, stripped down to my trunks, and mowed the lawn out at the lake. And when I had done, I had this dust all over me, and I brushed it off everywhere. Well, it was full of poison ivy.
Oh.
And, so all night long, I'm laying there just like, can't relieve the itching, it's just everywhere, and you're like, you're just beside yourself. You're like literally beside yourself that you're in pain like that. And it's like, all you can do is just say, God, just here, help, just help. I'm beside myself. And then the blessing of sleep may set in, but there's a surrender that goes on in the middle of the night when there isn't things to get your mind off of what's stirring inside, or what's unrelenting, let's put it that way. And it can be just as real with the mind as it is on the body, probably more so with the mind, more regular.
I'm right with Bill. John and Bill, listen to those guys, okay? The word that I had was vulnerable, to make yourself vulnerable. How do you offer yourself to God? Bill talked about surrender. It's just like, okay, I'm done. Maybe it's like the first step to admit that you're powerless. Maybe that's offering yourself. But to just say, okay, there's nothing else I can do. There's nothing else that I can rely on except you, God. I think that vulnerability, that openness, that just being kind of played is all what I would understand as offering myself to God. So bringing God to awareness, acknowledging God's presence, leaning into that presence is the adoration. Surrender, the admission of vulnerability. God is the only reliance that we have. I think that's the offering. Works for me when I'm able to do it. Did you get any relief that night, Bill? Did you finally get to sleep after the?
I did,
What's
yeah. Yeah, after a little bit, but a couple hours worth of wrestling. Felt like,
You have
what
about
was
a
it?
gallon of calamine lotion to go with it.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just getting so PO'd. I mean, like, and then finally I'm like, I'm just doing this to myself now, so just chill, just breathe and relax as best I can, but then it'll start in again. I think people that have burns go through the same thing, that there's something about a burn that just is unrelenting and doesn't stop, and it's only drugs that can numb it. Thank God we've got them, because the people that are burn victims are the ones that I find are probably suffer the most of anybody. So I don't know.
Oh, it's bad. My husband, he took the scouts down to Mexico and he would do Dutch oven cooking, and he stepped in hot coals because it looked just like the gray sand. And I had to take him in, and they scrubbed your burn with a scrunch, no lie. And then they have to clip back any of the dead skin so that you don't go into gangrene.
Yeah.
And I stood there and cried because and I thought about that, Bill, because that was just one area of his foot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I look back to birthing my babies, and I found that when I would tense up, just it would make it so much worse. And I was thinking about how much it's the same thing when I'm going through when I was going through grief, and the same thing when I've gone through the emotional things that I don't have anybody to share with, that I have found that when I am tensed up, it's almost like it reminds me of the toys we used to have with the little kids, that we'd wind them up, and the toys would go nuts around the room. It reminded me of that emotionally, I was just like water on a hot skillet. And then when I would just say, okay, enough is enough, then it seemed, and of course I had to pray through that because I just wasn't doing too well on my own with that. Then it was like, why didn't I do this sooner? Why? Why did I allow myself to get so wound up? Because it reminds me of, I didn't cause, there's things that I do cause, but on the things that I get all wound up, I didn't cause it. I can't cure it. I can't fix it. And when I accept that, it's like, this is so much easier. Why did I do that? And then it's like, just celebrate that I did.
I love that image, though. That is so perfect. Yeah. Think of it, when the drunk driver hits you, and you've got all these injuries and the drunk driver is just fine, because they're just rolling with it. They're not tensed up. They're flaccid. They're just, there's an image from Chuang Tzu about a drunk man falling out of a wagon and he's not hurt, because he's not resisting the fall, he just rolls with it. And that tension
Like a
is
big
what
piece of
really
spaghetti.
adds to the pain. What's that, Kathy?
Like a big piece of spaghetti. They just sort of,
Yeah.
like a noodle. Yeah.
Well, there's something to that we're adding to the pain as we tense up, as we fight it and resist it. We can roll with it more. And I think that also has to do with offering yourself to God. Kind of the way both Bill and Lori have. Holding on, you're angry, you're this or that. And then when you just let go, not that it just goes away, but it certainly gets better. I think that has to do with offering yourself to God. Once you have adored God, become aware of God's presence, and then you actually allow yourself to fall into that embrace.
Adored doesn't seem like the right word.
I know, that's what I mean. It's not a word that I would use, because it's calling up wrong things from my Catholic upbringing. You know, it's just all the wrong imagery and feeling. But I think that's why I'm saying redefine these words for yourself. What does it mean for you to come back into God's presence? How would you express that? What would be your shortcut, your touchstone for getting back to that place? What does it mean for you to offer yourself? If that's not the right word, phrase, or image, come up with one for yourself. That's why I wanted to go through this. What do you think they mean? What has been your experience? So that Brother Lawrence has this other, I'm sorry, go ahead. Come on.
Just going to say that I think that you were speaking about the language and the usage of the word adore. And what came to my mind was the fact that we're reading from a 16th century writing, and here we are in the 21st century. And things meant, they didn't mean the same. Some words didn't mean the same as the same word doesn't mean the same then as it does today. And it's just the same thing to me as when you say, when we hear that we must fear God. Well, fear doesn't mean to be afraid of him. Fear means to mean to respect, to honor, and to even submit to God, but not fear him, to be afraid of him, per se.
Yep. Good point, John. I think part of the problem that I have with adore is that it seems abstract to me. It's not something concrete. It's not something that I can do. Where's the action step? You know, that's what's kind of missing for me. If it's not missing for you and the word works, then by all means, go for it. But for me, I need something else that is something that I can actually do and do repeatedly. And so that's why I like to try to redefine these things, or at least kick them around enough so that we can start to find our own definitions. Brother Lawrence then goes into this wonderful little image. During the worst sufferings, ask God humbly and lovingly, as a child would of his good father, for acquiescence, for submission, for surrender to his will, and for the help of his grace. I will aid you in this with my poor and worthless prayers. There's this humility of Christ speaking again. Then he says, God has several ways of drawing us to him. Sometimes he hides himself from us, but faith, which alone never fails us in our need, should be our support and the foundation of our trust, which should be completely in God. And of course, you know that I'm not going to like that God hides himself from us, because I don't think that's possible for God. It wouldn't be in his nature, and God is everywhere, everywhen anyway, so how's he going to do that? But that's certainly our experience, right? So once again, putting the action on God's side of the net when really it's on our side of the net. When God seems to be hiding himself from us, it's because we can't find the presence. We can't reconnect.
But wait a minute, what does that mean with Jesus? Because Jesus on the cross said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Even Jesus himself felt that that God was hiding himself.
That's true. But that's Jesus' own subjective experience at the moment. It's not the reality.
It's felt like he's missing, like he's just not there, like you're totally on your own.
It totally felt like that to him. But that doesn't mean that God wasn't there. But it certainly felt like God wasn't there. I mean, think of all the times that you felt like God wasn't there. That either God was a million miles away, or he had abandoned you, or he's even working consciously against you. We've all felt all those things. But is that really the truth? Is that the truth of God's nature? Or is that just our human oscillation? Back and forth and back and forth, as we always do. And I know when we think of Jesus, we think, well, he was God, so, you know, he knew what was going on. But he was still fully human as well. He was experienced what he was experiencing in a moment of absolute duress, ultimate agony. And he cried out. Yeah. And he's quoting the psalm there. You know? So the psalmist felt the same thing. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why have you abandoned me? And yet scripture also tells us that God will never leave us or forsake us. So deal with those contradictions if you will, in whatever way you want to. But to me, this is Jesus' humanity speaking. He was experiencing what we all experience, times of rest and stress. So it's not unbelief that God hides himself, but we certainly experience. Carol, were you going to say something?
Yes, for me, when God doesn't fix a situation, and I go, where are you, God? Like, when are you going to like show yourself? And the Lord has shown me, what if I don't fix it? Am I enough for you? Like, what if I don't mend the situation? And then I sit with that for a long time. And then through the weeks and the months, finally I surrender and I go, you're enough, God. If you don't fix it, you're enough. And there's such a depth now, and it's probably because I'm older too, but he is enough, you know, and the depth is so different. It's almost surreal that if I go in his presence and I focus on him, the situation doesn't, it kind of disappears. You know, it's amazing. It's like, and then the Lord says, Carol, this is temporary. You know, it might seem really horrendous what I'm putting you through, but look how much stronger you are in me. You're not strong in yourself anymore. You are leaning on me. And that's the faith. It was worth it, Carol. And that's what he keeps telling me. The pain is worth it. If it's emotional or if it's physical or both, like he's worth it. And I look back what he's taken me through and I go, yes, Lord, you are worth it. And the pain was worth it, because that's what I'm looking for, the depth of like, what am I doing here in the end? And it's like, I just want to walk with you, Lord. Take it all. You know, you're worth it to me. Take it all. That there's nothing in this world that's worth not having that close relationship with the Lord. I hope, you know, some of you can relate to that.
Amen.
Yeah.
You're girl.
That's beautiful, Carol. Absolutely. You're channeling Brother Lawrence here. My gosh, in such a beautiful and perfect way. And that's it. I think Carol just encapsulated both the adoration part and the offering of self part, kind of what Bill was saying, kind of what Lori was saying. I mean, that when she finally gets to that point that God is enough, and then the situation itself doesn't seem so bad, even though nothing's changed. You know, you feel it differently. And that I'm really convinced that's what Brother Lawrence is talking about. It's stated in a way that sounds like it's going too far, but there's a reality there. If we can get to that point Carol was talking about, and finally get Bill and Lord talking, okay, let go, let God. You know, all those cliches that make you want to punch something, but there's a truth in there. Well, I don't think we can top that. I think we should stop right there. We'll pick up the last two paragraphs next week and hit the 14th letter. But hopefully that gave you some insights from what everybody is saying as to how this really pertains, how we can use it. You know, like I'm always prattling on in our opening prayer, give us one thing that we can take with us that is going to help us to be able to put into practice what we're talking about here. And maybe you found the one thing that helps you to concretize something that we're talking about, that you can actually start to practice and do in your activities of daily living, your ADLs, right?
I really love that because I was thinking about Bill's comments last week when he And I was thinking about like this spiritual bypass thing, right? It's like this idea that we can, just put it in God's hands so we don't have to wrestle with it. But I think what Carol just touched on is that you can put it in God's hands without any kind of a spiritual bypass. I'll have to go back to the recording to see what you just said, Carol. But that was
that was it. That was a keeper.
mm.
Yeah. And are all of you familiar with the spiritual bypass? Yeah.
No, I'm not.
It-
I
it's-
missed last week.
So do you want to explain it, William? You want me to explain it?
Well, my understanding of it is, and it's something that I think I'm guilty of sometimes, where it's, you, instead of working on a problem, you're like, oh, I just put it in God's hands, and, I don't have to think about it or deal with it, or, and I think when Bill was talking last week about like this not taking responsibility, I can see a bit of a spiritual bypass in there, but I think tonight that becomes a lot more clear on what he's like, that adoration, that it's a moving closer to God in my suffering, not pretending like my suffering doesn't exist, or short circuiting the problem,
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense because
So-
there's times in suffering that there's a distraction that I put myself through a distraction
Mm.
instead of facing it. So Carol, that really is beautiful. Of it was very beautifully explained of allowing God to be enough. So thank you.
Mm.
But notice, this is really, I think this is an important distinction that William's bringing up, because the spiritual bypass is an over-spiritualizing. It's almost a superstitious leap that you take. But the key is you're avoiding the work. You're avoiding actually going through the process that we need to go through when we get to suffering and hit the difficult. Notice that Carol is not talking about bypassing the difficulty.
Right.
Mhm.
She faced it, she went through the difficulty, and then finally found herself exhausted on the shore on the other side. Bill is giving us the exact same image as well as Lori. They're going through the difficulty, and then they get to the other side. It's not this kind of sterile and bloodless bypass and trying to get around the issue. That never works. That's always going to come back to haunt you. Remember the story of Jacob wrestling with God? It's the same thing, isn't it? He wrestles with God all night long, and then ends up with a limp on the other side of it. But finally, just exhausts himself on the other side. And then he gets his new name, Israel, one who struggled with God. That's what Israel means, one who has striven with God, strived with God. That's the whole issue. That's what we're trying to get us to that other side. So no bypassing. You do have to go through it. You do have to wrestle. But eventually, when you just wrestled out, then you can offer yourself. And that's me. So good stuff. Great stuff. Okay, we better stop now. Scotty?
Lord, thank you for being here with this study and sharing our thoughts and ideas on these various concepts and constructs. And I just ask you, like it says in Scripture, to help us when it talks about don't lean on our own understanding of things, acknowledge you in all our ways, trust you with all our heart, and you make our path straight. So when we come up against these things, adoration, love, and turning our situations over to you or doing the work ourselves, help us to find the right balance, the right design. You as the designer can certainly make it clear for us. So we pray that for not clarity per se, Lord, but just for your presence. That's really what we need in all of the circumstances and situations, because in your presence, there's perfection, and we can learn to trust in you. And when we take our eyes off you and start doing things our own way, we get ourselves in trouble. So we just thank you that we're there to pray to, you're there to pray to, and that you listen, and that you're intimately involved in our lives. And help us to stay out of your way, Lord, but be willing to do the work that you have for us this day. We love you, Lord. It's in your holy and precious name we pray. We give our thanks and say our amens. Amen.
Great job, everybody. Thank you so much.
You know,
And just know that I am the proud papa of 2 bouncing baby kidney stones. So I had to go through it to the other side.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you
the
so
What
much.
visual
did you
imagery
name
as a
them?
sign
That's
off.
what I
there.
want to know.
What's
Yeah,
that, Lori?
what did you name them? That's what I want to know.
Oh.
Frick and Frack, probably. Rocky and.
I never even saw them, so I have no idea. Never saw
I
them.
thought you would have kept them. They should be,
I
they
don't think
should be on your
A
bookshelf.
little
I
charm.
don't
If-
think they let you do
if I
that
passed
anymore, do
them-
they?
If I
They-
passed them, I never saw them, so I don't know. I never saw the little faces.
And you never want to see them again. Look at you.
I
you have
never
abandoned
want to see them
grandchildren.
again. No, they are gone. Never.
Uh,
All
Yeah.
right, everybody. Have a great
All
night,
righty,
guys.
everybody.
Good night.
See you Sunday. Sunday.
Thanks. See you Sunday.
Bye,
Bye.
Coffee.
Bye, Linda.
Good night, Sherry, Carol,
Night.
Jordana, Linda.
Sorry.
Oh, Jordana, you're Jordana again. You're not Yvonne anymore. Just so you remember.
Yeah, thank God
Night,
I'm not.
Jordana. Bye, Linda.
Sorry.
Okay, see you guys soon.